Hi, I'm Kathleen Domick, and I'm here with Julie Abijanac. And we were colleagues, or we both went to Cranbrook together, and that's how we met. And we're going to talk a little bit about our art and about how COVID has affected us and what's going on in the world right now.
Yeah. So, as Kathleen mentioned, I'm Julie Abijanac. I am a professor at Columbus College of Art and Design. I've been there 17 years. Um, yeah, it's been a long time. Uh, and I am a practicing. Um, I'm going to call myself a craft artist. Although when Kathleen knew me, I was in the painting department at Cranbrook. But due to changes, which we'll probably get into those conversations too in a little bit, I had to switch my practice over, which for me I think has been a positive change in my career and not a negative one. So I think that that's kind of exciting. So
Oh,
yeah.
and I guess I should say that I am a jewelry designer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I do a combination of product pieces, production pieces, and one-of-a-kind pieces. And
And
I
they're beautiful.
and I sell through galleries and museum shows. So,
And you do a lot of fairs, right? Is it a fair? Is that what you would call them? Art fairs or craft or jewelry fairs?
uh, well, I tend to do the curated shows, which are usually hosted by a museum or by a craft organization. Um, the Often they will have a couple days of wholesale and a couple days of retail, and yeah, the galleries come and spend a couple days with you, and then you get to show your work to the public. So I guess some craft fairs, but mostly kind of the curated museum shows. They tend to be smaller and indoors.
Right.
Um,
And I bet the networking is probably incredible with that. Like you really get to meet.
the networking is good, although I've got to say, over the years, the buyers are getting older and less people are coming to the shows. So as a result, I think more people are going online and selling directly to the public.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's becoming a harder and harder nut to crack.
Yeah. That's
Even
great. I
with
mean,
the,
but I kind of feel like that's like that with all art making right now. Like I actually just had a conversation with a gallery owner a couple days ago, and we were talking about the difference between, like I'm not really concerned about um, being repped by anybody. I really like being very independent and having the opportunity to make my choices with, where I want to show work or who I want to kind of connect with. And I think the internet has created this moment where you have this opportunity to get yourself out there the way you want to do it, and it's very independent, which is kind of nice.
I think the independence is a plus and a minus. When I left Cranbrook, I suddenly went from this community where I was getting feedback. I understood what other people were seeing, not just what I was seeing,
Mm-hmm.
to suddenly being in my studio alone.
Yeah.
So then when I started the shows, I had that community
Right.
again. And so going more online, it eliminates that communal feel. And to me, that's part of the joy of making art, is finding people's feedback, getting that critique. And I think you and I have managed to continue that sometimes during COVID, with me
Yes.
texting you saying, what do you think of this? What do you think of that?
Sending pictures and then using the phone as a way to like use a color to circle something, an arrow, and then type in information. Yeah. I think, yeah, I think that, for you and I are very like down and dirty, get to work. And when our heads are down, they're down, and we really kind of crank on that making aspect. But I agree. I think that you and I are also very social people, and really need that community to kind of reassure that what you're doing is valuable or has validity in what's going on right now or what's around you. And yeah, sometimes it's hard to get that to create that community outside of outside of the school world. You know, I feel like teaching, I'm always paying attention to like the students because I'm always thinking, holy crap, this kid is gonna like bypass me and like just hurt my face and get going. And I'm gonna be like, ah, I gotta make more. So that's, I mean, that's the one beautiful thing with teaching. I think that it's kind of kept me like really aware of who the contemporaries are and what's going on and how are people moving through the art world and navigating how they're getting shows or applying for grants and stuff like that. So that's been good. But yeah, for sure. You know, I think that community is really important. And it has been really nice to, you know, be able to communicate with you and be able to talk about work that we're working on and get feedback on what's happening and what we're doing.
Yes,
Go ahead.
I'm very good at tuning out the world. Like
Yes.
I can be in here, I have a book going and I'm listening to the book, and I can be in here and lose complete track of time. So with the whole COVID going on, that aspect of my life has not changed very much. It's easy for me to tune everything out.
Yeah.
And find joy in the process of making. But also the struggle of trying to connect with other people. I'm not altogether comfortable with the Zoom yet, and so that's been difficult.
Well, practice.
Yes, exactly.
Number one in the books. Well, you know, I think that, and just to kind of go back to the COVID issue, there's this weird, and you and I had already talked about this a little bit, about this moment of PTSD where I also felt like that when I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, that I was starting to do a lot of research about my disease. And I think I'm not sure, did you do the same thing? Were you like really like involved in what is going on?
Yes. So I had stage 3 breast cancer when I was 34. And I was told that there are usually 2 kinds of patients. One who reads everything and wants to know everything.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one who just says, just fix it.
Right.
I was read everything in small doses. Like I couldn't take it all at once. But yes, I think this whole COVID, because when you're going through chemo for a long period of time or radiation, you're worried about getting colds, and you're living in a society that's not necessarily worried about giving you a cold.
Right.
Where this time, people are conscious of each other's germs and hopefully respectful of that.
Yeah.
But yes, it does bring back memories of that. And
yeah. I feel like it also, I mean, because I was like you, I wasn't just like fix it. I needed to know, what is this thing that's going on in my body? I got to figure out what it looks. I want to know what it looks like. I want to read more information about it. Why did it happen to me? Because I had it. I remember speaking with you when you were diagnosed and you were going through this, and then literally I remember 2 years later calling you.
Yeah.
And being like, I've got Hodgkin's.
Yeah.
And you know, just I think that when I was starting to hear about this COVID, I became really interested in, wow, it does all these really weird things to the body. And I was really fascinated by that, and fascinated by this uncontrollable virus that just had different effects on different people, you know, like cancer, different cancers, different people, different outcomes.
Yes.
And I thought there was something really interesting about that. And I know that sounds really weird, but just super fascinated with what the disease looked like under a microscope, how it kind of grows in the body. I was really kind of taken by that.
Did your process of how you make change when you got diagnosed, or do you think it changed and moved into fiber prior?
It was, no, I was painting up until I was diagnosed. And yeah, it totally changed you know, it's funny because my Travis, who's my husband now, fiance then, he would be sitting in the doctor's appointment and he's listening to everything. And I'm kind of like, so am I going to be able to paint? Am I going to be able to weld, stuff like my thinking is, how am I going to, what is it that I'm going to be allowed to do and not allowed to do? And I just remember the doctor just being like, yeah, no, you're not going to do those things unless you wear a glove and a mask. And I'm like, well, a painter loves the smell of oil. Are you crazy? Like, that's the whole point of, being in the studio. But I think it was my moment to reinvent myself, and to just figure out, and I was kind of in this weird, like, not happy with what I was making moment anyways. So it kind of came at this time where I was just like, perfect. I'm allowed to make this change and not have to like explain it.
Right.
When you're in academia, you really have, it's always about, why do you make these things? What is this about? So you're always consistently explaining, why you're making, how you're making, and for who you're making. And it just felt good to know that I could just kind of go, oh, I get to change, and not really, I could just say I had cancer and I had to change my method of making. So
for me, with the kind of breast cancer that I had, it's the only kind of breast cancer that wasn't it's called triple negative. So it doesn't cause, your hormones don't cause it to grow, or there's a protein called it's HER2 positive is the other kind that causes the breast cancer. So mine is triple negative. So the theory is that it could have been an external environmental problem that caused it to grow. And so because of that, my process has shifted a little, but I'm just super, like, I wear a full respirator when I work,
right,
all day long, and I'm used to it.
Right.
I'm like, I have decent ventilation, but I became more conscious. Like, I was burning synthetic fabric and realized, whoo, can't do that anymore.
Right. Yeah. I mean, did we not learn anything from Ava Hess? Yeah. I mean, the same thing here, just having to really pay attention to how I was making soap fiber was the thing that I knew was completely safe for me. I didn't have to worry about metals. I didn't have to worry about, any inhaling any kind of chemicals. So, but yeah, I think that I don't know about you, but I feel like, I'm happy with where my work is now. I feel like it's finally starting to get some recognition that it hasn't had in the past. So feels pretty good. Feels good to have people want to look at your work and know who you are, which is really nice.
Being known for your work.
Yeah. So what are you working on these days? What's some of the new work that you've been kind of playing with?
I am playing, well, I'm doing a couple, I'm a little bit all over the place right now. So because I'm a jewelry designer, jewelry artist, I do have kind of a couple things going on, where one is more production work that is more acceptable to the public. It's more mainstream. And then I'm making pieces that are more one of a kind. And I had spent a year in Vancouver, or 6 months, and we spent a lot of time walking through the woods. And when you're going through the woods, everything is growing. And I became like obsessed with mushrooms. And so I started incorporating different materials. Like, I have an example here, which is a piece of driftwood that I found at the beach. And then this is copper enamel that I hand formed. And then these are carnelian, and it's a brooch. And so I started also incorporating found objects in some of my pieces now as well, to kind of recreate that growth. Mm-hmm. And so I'm always looking at things that are growing. And I always go back to metal because I like how the vision transforms from the actual thing to my vision through metal and the material.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not going to be a exact representation of what I was looking at. It skews in that process. And I like that. I like that people will look at it and be like, wow, it looks like it's growing, but I'm not sure what it is.
Right.
And I can say, well, this is actually, there's a mushroom that looks almost exactly like this, but because of how I put it together, they won't necessarily get that right away.
Right. But there's
That
also something really beautiful about like you're transforming a hard metal, like, and then you're creating the soft moment with it, like this real nice, there's this beautiful shift that starts to happen. And you know, I would say that a lot of that, there's this supple quality about a lot of your work, right? Like the way they bend, there's that supple moment that happens where they bend really nicely. Or I was thinking one of my favorite pieces, which I actually use in my studio practice for craft identities. It's the one with the little silver, the silver necklace that's got the fabric in, like sewn in the inside. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, that was actually one of the first pieces that I started putting silk into it. So it was a pod.
Yeah.
And it kind of hangs opened and the silk is stitched inside and there's a little bit of human hair coming out of it too. So it looks like it's growing.
Yeah.
That was one of the first pieces where I incorporated fiber, like fabric and metal, and actually showed the stitching in it.
Mm-hmm.
I did this one more recently, which this is silk.
Okay.
And I treated the silk. And I'm not a trained fiber artist, so I tend to use the fabric almost like I would metal. So I took the metal wire and stitched through it, and then it was allowed me to shape the fabric with it.
Yeah.
And then I like the combination of the hard and soft.
Yeah. I think when, you know, because I call myself a fiber textile artist and I'm not trained obviously in that as well. But I think that some of the beauty in not being trained in that is that you think way, like the way you think about using it is thinking outside the box for typical, maybe a typical traditional fiber textile artist. You know, we're just kind of like, well, why not? Why can't I just do this? You know,
right.
That, you know, we kind of break some of those rules for using the material in the way we want it. I think it's interesting because a lot of my work has shifted from the cancer metastasis to that idea of cordyceps or parasite and host, like still falling in that same moment, but thinking about that. And so I've been working with Tom Gaddis, who is the dean of all of our departments here at CCAD, and he's a woodworker. He turns wood. And I'll just turn wood and he'll be like, hey, Abijanac, come pick up a bag. I got some stuff for you. And I'll like walk out of there with a ton of stuff. One of my favorite pieces, which I just finished this year that took forever. I don't even know if this will be, if it'll even do it justice. But so this is one of the pieces that he turned.
Wow.
Right. Maybe I should go over here where there's more of a white wall. So then you'll notice that I felt it in the cracks of the wood.
Nice.
And then I hand beaded all of the felt with these little Japanese like glass seed beads. So there's another little section, right?
Beautiful.
So yeah, I like this idea where if you walk past it, you don't see it or you don't acknowledge it, but then you're just like, whoa, wait a minute, there's something going on there. And then you have to get up really close. So I think that's like the same thing with your brooch, where from far away, it looks like all those things go together. And then you have to kind of like come in and really, you know, have a moment with it to acknowledge what's happening with all the parts, which is really nice.
Well, also the nice thing about having somebody else start it or using a found object as your departure is it tells you where to put those. That bowl told you where to put the felt.
Right.
It told you it had some say in it versus you completely controlling the whole thing from start to finish.
Which is such a correlation with disease. right?
Yeah.
I mean, that all just kind of works together. It has that moment where, the disease kind of takes over and does what it needs to do, right? And your body is what it acquires to do what it has to do. So, yeah, I think I'm really fascinated because even the work behind me, I'm every time I put work up, it doesn't look the same, or I would tell a curator that I'm relinquishing the disease on them. So when they curate it, it becomes their disease. So it's this idea where I'm giving it to them and it's not mine anymore. It was mine at first when I made it. And sometimes they freak out. People will freak out about that. And then other times people will just be like, oh, they think it's an interesting moment. But
Well, the same process happens with jewelry. Is once it's handed over, they can wear it however they want. And
right.
when I was at Cranbrook, I did those long vertebrae pieces
Yes.
that were just wrapped around you. And the once it was handed over, they got to choose how they wanted to wrap it, if they wanted to hang it down their back or down their front. And so, yes, that's kind of goes along with this similar concept.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did the piece in the back,
Yeah.
so do you feel like your concept drives the process, or is the process driving the concept? In other words,
I see what you're saying. Yeah. I think it kind of it goes between the two, right? It's kind of like the concept or the idea of parasite and host is an overarching theme that you'll find in my work. But then it's the material tells me how I'm going to create that moment.
Yeah.
So it has that duality where it's one or the other. But I just don't feel like, because some people will ask me if it's art therapy, and I don't see any of my work as art therapy at all. I find my work it's a conversation or a statement about what disease is and what disease does, but then also the beauty in disease. Like something that could kill you also is incredibly beautiful underneath a microscope, right? So finding that moment, which really sometimes will bother people. Like some people don't like that thought.
Well, there's a similar concept even in the mushroom. Like the mushroom makes a lot of people go, eek. But when you can find the beauty in that object but keep a little bit of the creepiness.
Yeah.
Like me, that you have to maintain a little bit of that.
Yeah. But then a mushroom could kill somebody too. So it has that, I mean, right? So
and it's kind of a parasite. It grows on like a tree that's already dead, or
it's removing nutrients from it so it can survive.
Yeah.
Right. And but then there are mushrooms that are good for us and they provide nutrients, and then there's mushrooms that are just not good for us and that could possibly kill us. So I think there's something really, really kind of beautiful about that, how this little innocent thing has so much power.
Right. When I was in undergrad, I remember my professor there was like, well, what are you trying to do here? And I was looking at sea creatures, and I was like, well, I want to take this creepy thing and make it kind of beautiful. And he's like, oh, that's okay, I'm gonna leave you alone. You're good there.
That's great.
Keep going.
I know, right? It's so funny. Yeah. I was we won't talk about what I was painting when I was in grad school. You might have to shut this down.
That's true.
What was that?
That's true.
Remember, I almost got kicked out of Cranbrook.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, because I had that. Remember, I had that demo chair.
Yes, and that woman tried to sit on it.
Yes, there was something in the chair.
Yes,
that would make somebody maybe want to sit on it. Yeah, and I had, what was his name? Welsh. What's his name? The Welsh president, Roy.
Yeah.
Yeah, came into my studio and was like, well, Julie, I was just like, Beverly was standing and I was like, oh my God. So we lost a donor because of me, but you wouldn't, because I almost got kicked out.
So let's talk about Cranbrook a little bit.
Yeah.
So at Cranbrook, it was explained to me at times that sculpture and painting was fine art.
Mm.
Printmaking and photo was secondary art. And then there was craft.
Yep.
And do you feel like at it's like craft was a little bit poo-pooed or
Don't you think it still is a little bit today?
but yet there are artists like you who are taking these techniques and making them part of their art. And so
Kind of, I'm about, it's like this, I'm on this tightrope between craft and fine art.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so also at Cranbrook, like a metalsmith would never show something that was falling apart because the construction of it, it had to be constructed well in order for us to even critique it in the metals department.
Because crafts,
Because
history is craftsmanship.
The process was so important
right.
Within the concept, where in maybe the sculpture department, it was concept driven and technique and craftsmanship seemed to come secondary. How do you address that in the classroom? Or do you still think it's an issue?
Well, I do think it's an issue because I mean, I often have found students that would just, you know, if there's a glass blower that's making beautiful goblets and they're beautifully formed and shaped and they're all the same height and same size, there's something really incredible about that to me. Like to be able to do a batch production like that and everything is perfect every time, there's something, I mean, there's this persistency, there's this patience with the material, there's this getting to know it. And I think that sometimes fine arts students, which also, I think that they have this, they're just like, well, it's just craft. It's just something that's supposed to be made to be used. Or art is made to be looked at, you know. So there's this difference. They differentiate these two worlds by mass production, right? Or just you know, capitalism. I think that's where they kind of drop craft in, and then they kind of separate it by that, you know. And it does, there becomes this conversation, you know, because I've let students kind of get down and dirty and crits and have a student be like, well, you know, I spend time throwing 100 bowls and they all look the same and you just threw paint on a piece of canvas and you're calling it art, you know. So there are these conversations that start to happen, and I think it's good that the students have their moments to, you know, like duke it out a little bit. You know, I monitor the duking out, but I think it's really important that that they're standing up for whether it is contemporary art, fine art, or whether it's craft, and they're standing up for their love of that making and that process.
Do you think the boundaries are blurring more though? Like,
No, because I think that, well, again, it depends. Like I stand in the middle. Like I think that if I were just doing all ceramic bowls or teapots, we would be having a different conversation, right? I think because I fall between the two, where I'm using craft material, but then I'm creating a contemporary moment with it,
right?
Or a non-traditional moment with it, that it shifts a little bit. So, you know, I don't like the difference between the two. I think craftsmanship is really important. And I also tell fine art students that as they continue to paint, they are becoming craftsmen using their material.
Yes.
Getting to know it. They're learning how they can manipulate it, make it do what they want it to do, and vice versa, you know, just having those moments with it. And that's what a person that's playing with clay or playing with glass, or I shouldn't say play, but that are working with those materials, there first comes the craftsmanship, and then comes like this idea of how do I then manipulate it, right? Because I think that learning how to blow glass, that's a very formal action.
Right.
You know, and we learn formal things with painting, right? We learn perspective, we understand color. But I think that the ability to break the rules faster in that world seemed to come sooner, where in the craft world, I think for all of us, it's really important that you have a great understanding for the technique, so you know when you can break that rule and how to use it to your advantage.
Yes. And for metalsmith in particular, if you are to make a piece out of all metal, normally that piece has to be planned out and problem solved, because you can't, if you have 10 solder joints, you have to know in what order you're going to solder those together. Else when you solder one, the other one's going to flow and fall apart. So to me, undergrad was like it was like filling up my toolbox with the techniques. And then when I got to Cranbrook, it was really, here are your techniques, go explore and really get conceptual with this. And I just wonder, you know, sometimes maybe in the painting department, that conceptualization may come sooner.
I think it probably does. I mean, I think our juniors, especially our seniors, are definitely are pushing boundaries with their mediums.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Much quicker. I even think maybe much quicker than, I don't know, maybe I did. I think that I was still doing pretty formal work. But it's funny because I felt like I was a little more experimental in high school because I knew nothing.
Right.
And then when I learned too much, I became this weird, like everything was like painted perfectly and the light was here and the shadow was here. And it was like, it almost kind of felt like it, you know, maybe ruined a little bit of what I didn't know, you know, it was, yeah. So, and I'm wondering if that's, you know, how it just kind of, just really kind of made traditional fine arts for me just got to be a little too monotonous.
Yeah.
Right? You know, it's like, I can't paint another still life, you know, and I felt like I couldn't, you know, abstract painting I did a lot of abstract painting in high school. And I mean, I called it that, but you know, I felt like I couldn't do that in college. I felt like I lost that ability to just make it, like, not worry about any decision I make. So if I put this line here, formally, is that the middle ground or the background or the foreground? So I would start overthinking all these weird, like, formal design principles, and then all the art principles that go with it. It was a little, crazy.
So in your process of working, do you feel like so when I do a show, they need to see that most of the work it's a body of work. It has to kind of be uniform. But I get this urge to be like, hey, I want to make that. And it goes nothing with this. Do you feel that kind of pressure in your work? Like a new piece has to have the same aesthetic that your older pieces did? That if you were to jump and do a 360, people would be like, what the hell? Or is that what you did when you got cancer, that you were able to throw everything out and just start it?
Yeah. I mean, I think definitely when I got cancer, I was able to throw it out and start where I wanted. I think right now, I think people, even if I switch from beading to like wrapping to my paper work, that people usually know it's me because of the amount of handwork, right? Yeah. It's the amount, the quality of the material that I'm using and how much I'm using of that material. So they'll associate that with me. And then that conversation of, you know, the umbrella content, like it all kind of falls under. But I feel like I feel like I can kind of I can flow pretty easily from, well, today I want to do this piece that's going to be in paper, and then I'm going to do this piece that's going to be beading, you know, or I'm going to do like this piece that I showed you in Cuba where I did nothing but chainmail, right? But it's this portion, and because there's 1,800 inches of this stuff, people were like, oh yeah, well, of course that's Julie. That's what Julie does, you know?
Yeah.
So, you know, or even rapping, because that even rapping is like that same, like it's a lot.
Right. Do
So,
you, if it's not going well, do you take it all apart and start again?
oh yeah, this piece,
How
I
many,
think, this one I
yeah,
started
how many
when I
times
first
do you
started,
take it apart?
twice. I remember I started one, and I remember showing Kelly Malakosic the piece. I'm like, yeah, what do you think? She's like, it's a glob of red beads. And I'm like, it sure is. You know, like, yeah, those. And then I was just like, I had to redo it. But yeah, often I will start something and then just if I have to redo it. But I always start like really kind of very small. So like,
Right.
you know, if you were to look at, you know, like so this is made with pantyhose. So you
Yeah.
can see the back. So pantyhose polyfiber, and then I knot them.
Yeah.
And then I start to obviously stitch them together. So they start
Right.
to create the shape. And then I start to bead them. And the beading is kind of what creates their really unusual shapes.
Right.
So when I first did one of these, I just like, I made one gigantic like polyfiber filled pantyhose piece. And then I started beading it. And I was really liking like the weird, shifting crazy shape it was getting, but then it was just like, well, what am I gonna do with this? Like, am I gonna make 1,000 of these things? And it was like all hand beaded, like you saw absolutely no fiber at all. And I was just like, hey, I can't, this is ridiculous. And then whenever, you know, Kelly was like, yeah, it looks like a red blob, I'm like, that's all I needed to hear to make it change what I was gonna do.
And you needed the negative space to be able to read the rest of it.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I mean, what about you? I mean, how do you work through that?
Well, I text you. I text you and I say, this isn't working. I take things apart. Like if I look at something and it is wrong, I take it apart and I fix it. And if it's still wrong, I take it apart and I fix it again.
Yeah.
So that doesn't happen with the production pieces because they're designed to be simple. They're designed to be clean.
Right.
But with the bigger pieces, yeah, I futz with it and futz with it. This piece is, it's hard to see, but these are enamel copper form pieces. And then they're hung. So I didn't know what I was going to do with them. And what I did is I covered them with chain. So the chain is all bunched up and then it creates kind of the dangly texture on top of it. And then within it, I have the iolite. And so it was one of those things where I bought chain and then I bought more chain. And then I still needed to add more chain. And I just, and it may not be right for everybody, but I can tell when it's wrong.
Yeah.
Yes. And so I will work and work and work until it's not wrong.
Right. Yeah. I think that, and I remember I told you this a couple days ago, that I will often like walk around the house talking out loud to myself about troubleshooting something. Like, well, if I got to hang it, how am I going to do that? Like, it's always this weird, and my husband's always just like, are you telling me or talking through it? You know, and I'm just like, oh, I'm talking out loud again. But yeah, I think that definitely troubleshooting is something that I do more now as I'm working on work than before. Like, because you know, with paint, I'm just like, if I don't like it, I can cover it up.
Yeah.
You know, I'll let it dry, I'll cover it up. But with this, it's like once you put all that work in, I mean, it's devastating sometimes when you have to like completely tear down a piece because you're just like, oh man, you know, and I start to think about all that thread that I just used that are now like little cut pieces. And
yeah, I think about that in silver, you know, if I have had those moments where I've made something in silver and been like, that is wrong. Luckily, I can get it refined and scrap it. And,
right.
And
so anything you scrap, you can you can
I
burn, you can burn down. Is that I don't know what the term is for that.
Yeah, if it's been soldered, it has to be they have to get the solder out of it.
Okay.
So they have to refine it. I sell all my scrap to where I get things cast,
Mm-hmm.
and the caster gives me credit. And
Oh,
so that's where I can just hand over. I
right.
keep big boxes and then I just throw everything in there. I
Yeah.
know some people who even sweep up their
Shavings. The
yeah,
shaving.
their shavings
Wow.
and keep everything in a bucket, and they can send it into a different refinery.
That's
So
great.
yeah, they say that metalsmiths were the first people to recycle, and that you never know whether how old that metal is that you're using, because it is a process that they've with silver and gold that they've
Right.
constantly just reused and reused and scrapped and reused.
Yeah.
So it's not as easy in copper, but with silver and gold, yes. And
Yeah.
although the price of the silver from when I was at Cranbrook to now is astronomically different. So that's always an issue in working and selling.
Have you found yourself in situations where you're just like, well, right now I just can't afford it, and found yourself kind of like maybe not making but holding off and not buying because it's just too crazy expensive?
No, I will always find I will always find a way to be able to, but it has maybe pushed me in. So you can see the picture of the piece here,
Mm-hmm.
which that was little leather petals that I sat and hand wrapped and put them. And so when it laid on the neck, it was almost like a feather boa of leather and pearls and silver.
Mm-hmm.
I worked like that when I was going through chemo because I couldn't be in the studio. I could only sit on the couch and make something.
Right.
And I felt like I had to still have an outlet of making. And it really a whole bunch of things kind of shined from it. Like I learned how to create texture
Mm-hmm.
from leather and fabric, and so it really broadened
But
the way.
I feel like your older work, like the work that I was familiar with from at Cranbrook, I think there is an element of texture in it. It's just that it wasn't through that use of a softer material, right? I mean, like your vertebrae necklace, and then the one piece you showed earlier, that
With the
with
chainmail.
the round disc, and then even the chainmail piece that is all metal but has this illusion of being fabric, right? I think that.
Well, my older work, I was like, how do I make this metal look like this?
Mm-hmm.
And then I started looking at a lot of European artists, and they have a longer history of metalsmithing than we do, and they are incorporating more alternative materials. And I was like, well, why am I trying to make the metal look like this? Why can't I change that material and still call it jewelry
Right.
and still have it accepted as jewelry? And a lot of people, I do get the reaction of, what the hell is that? What do you do with that? But sometimes I feel like even if the piece, I learn from every piece.
Right.
I learned something. And again, it becomes another tool in my toolbox
Yeah.
to
Yeah, I
keep
think
going.
it's the same. I think for me, it's like every time I do something, I feel like it's I do it one way, and then I think about how's another way. What other material could I use to then create that same outcome? So for
Yeah.
me, it's always kind of fun to see I don't know what I can do with the beading, but you know, um,
Well, I want to see, show me that,
the wrapped piece.
yes, again.
Oh, so we were supposed to have a show in Columbus with at Brant Roberts Gallery. That was a show about color, the history of color. And so I was given, because Michelle knows that I either work all red, all white, all black. Like I'm very like one color, monochromatic, or and so it was so funny. She handed me the book and she was smiling, and I looked and I'm like, oh, Naples yellow. And she was like, oh, I can't wait. Like, I'm gonna make you use another color. And so I decided to, so at that time I was looking at Sheila Hicks. I love Sheila Hicks. You know who Sheila Hicks is?
I don't.
You got to look at her work. I mean,
you have like a halo behind your head. Sorry.
And so I was looking at a lot of her huge installation work she did a lot of wrapping of cord or of large rope and then wrapped it. And they're really beautiful pieces. And so I thought, I think it's important to sometimes pay homage to history and to think about history and how it kind of, I don't know, how can I use it in my way? So I went to Tom Gaddis and I'm like, hey, I want to do this sculptural piece, but I want to do wrapped pieces, and I would need for you to just throw some bowls with some holes in them. Just let's see what we can do. So he just came, and so at first I got just a ton of like vessels that look just like this, right? And I would just be like, okay, I'm gonna have to figure something out with them. And I started. So it's a triptych. There's 3 pieces. So this is all the holes have these wrapped tubes that go from one hole to the next, and they're just really just knotted, abstract. Cool. And I just really liked the idea of it kind of pulled me back into drawing and thinking about drawing, right?
Yeah.
At like Cy Twombly, there were some really nice moments with thinking about drawing and how line can be seen in a different way or used in a different way. And at that time, I thought I was going to be teaching a drawing class, and I thought, oh my God, I can make these kids all do fiber work, and then they could do lines with like drawings with these types of like moments. And then this little guy too. So
it's, what is it wrapped with?
Okay, so in this
being a craft person, I want to know how it's made.
Yeah, so there is a thick cord underneath this, and then I have macrame yarn.
Oh.
And yes, this is all macrame yarn. And what you do is you just basically, you take the cord, trying to find one that stands so I don't have to. So you take the cord and then you pull a piece of the macrame cord down, and then you just start to wrap over it. So there's no glue. It's self-holding.
Oh, cool.
Except for me gluing it into the piece. So
right.
But it's like a really tight binding. You have to do it very tight.
Right.
So so it just, and the thicker ones have, I think the thicker ones have 10 cord pieces together. And then I would bind them by wrapping them all the way to the end. So.
Cool.
Yeah. So I just wanted to do a piece that just kind of paid homage to Sheila Hicks, but also kind of played with Naples yellow in a different way, like in a way that I hadn't thought about it. And I felt like this was an opportunity for me to kind of push my color use, push a new way of using fiber. Yeah. And then,
how are they gonna hang, or are they gonna sit on a table?
They're gonna sit on pedestals. Yeah. I tell you what the name of Naples yellow is in German, but I can't. It's terribly long and it's weird. It's really hard to say it. I was like, I'm gonna slaughter that. I'm not gonna say it, but it's basically named after. So they said that Naples yellow was found in 3 forms. It was found as a powder, and it was found as a liquid, and then there was another form. I can't remember the other form that was powder, liquid, and then paste. And so I thought 3 pieces to resemble the 3 forms in which Naples yellow was found. And so that's why I decided to go with 3. So
And the concept of it going through the holes and coming out of form, is that working with the parasite still? Or is that working with?
I mean, it feels that way, but it also has this weird feeling of being like technology too, like wires.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I think that definitely there's this element of that the cord needs the vessel to maintain its structure.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know. I think I mean I just kind of like that they become these weird little, like, I don't know. Like there's this really aggressive conversation happening.
It's very in your face.
It is very in your face. Yeah. So, but when they're lit, and if they're lit just right, the shadows they produce on themselves around them it's pretty, and that's something that my work will do too. It's like it really relies on light play.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
it's true.
Yeah.
And do you find, because having an object sit on a pedestal is something new for you also?
Yes. Yep.
I mean, it's usually a wall piece or a hung piece.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of have to, you're also looking at it in
the round.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's been a long time since I've done sculptural work, and I thought this was a great way to kind of, fall back into that world a little bit and see how I could bring fiber into it. I feel like I always want to test the boundaries a little bit for myself.
Yeah.
And just explore and see I don't know, see how it's fun to see how my fine art half and my craft half kind of want to come together, and I always like to see where that goes. So
it's interesting because as a jewelry maker, people don't want you, I was saying kind of before, to branch out in a whole new direction right away. They want to see a progression there. And you as I guess a fine artist, you don't seem to have those limitations quite so much. Like, I feel like my aesthetic is maintained through my work, but I don't know whether people can necessarily see that.
Right.
And maybe it's also because it's worn on the body that it takes a little getting used to, the idea of wearing something that is not a pendant on your body.
Right.
So.
Well, but I think that I feel like I've seen some pretty incredible sculptural jewelry too that you can see often on the body, and how the point is that it literally shifts and changes.
Yeah.
And and I think that's I think it's just how we're brought up as makers, right?
Yeah.
I think I've never been in your situation where there was this very regimented active making, right? So maybe if I had that, my work would be different in that sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but did you notice I wore
your fingerprint?
I'm wearing the fingerprint.
So I'll talk a little bit about fingerprints. So when I went through cancer treatment, my mom had me dressed from head to toe in pink, because she's like, anything to support breast cancer, I'm going to give you. And I was like, how do I make this personal as a maker? And so I started molding fingerprints. And at first I gave my fingerprint to everybody. Instead of them wearing a Live Strong bracelet, they could wear my fingerprint. And then I started giving my fingerprint to other people going through treatment as a reminder, someone's gone through this and they've survived this, and you're going to survive this too. And then it became a whole company where I mold fingerprints, and the fingerprints pays for me, people who purchase it, then it pays for me to donate fingerprints to families who are going through cancer treatment.
Yeah, it's a great go check out Touchstone Jewelry, because that's where you can get these fingerprints. I love them. I mean, I did this, and then I think you have mine. I have yours. My mom has. I bought fingerprint.
Yes.
I did fingerprints for my mother, so my mother has fingerprints. So I think
And
it's
they have a nice feeling to them.
They do. They really do. They do. They sit real nice. My mom wears hers all the time. I don't think she's ever taken them off. She always wears her necklace. So.
Oh, that's nice to hear.
Yeah.
That makes me happy. I think we're about to wrap this up, huh?
We are about to wrap this up. See, an hour.
It just flew by.
Well, I had a great time, and I would like to thank Nicolette and Michael for allowing this opportunity to happen for us, because not often do we get to see each other living on opposite ends of the COVID United States.
Yes.
So I think that I'm hoping that it'll make us do this more often, and I hope people got something out of it. I did.
Thank you for inviting me to talk with you. It's always a pleasure.
Yes.
It's never a boring conversation.
Never boring.